And welcome to the Two Solitudes podcast, a victorious day here in Canada. The greatest result that we could ever have hoped for last night. I am, of course, talking about the U17s beating Costa Rica 3-2 last night in the U17 qualifier. Did anything else of note happen, Kevin?
Yeah, I almost broke my neck jumping on a guardrail after a Cameron Porter 94th minute equalizer in a CONCACAF quarterfinal games in front of 38,000 people, Duane.
I saw that too. And you know what? When it happened, I just kind of laughed. And I tweeted out that Impact fans have their Aguero moment, because that's really, you so rarely in the sport get a goal that you know instantly, like to use the hockey analogy, like a sudden death goal. You rarely get that in soccer since they got rid of the golden goal rule back, which they never should have done, but that's another topic altogether. But it was everyone. If you look, even Toronto FC's official Twitter account, they tweeted out, "Credit where credit's due. Congratulations, guys. Enjoy your night." So if TFC is tweeting at the Impact, congratulations, then you know most people in the country were just shaking their head and going, "Okay, that was kind of cool." So we'll move on.
But it's the way it happens. When you're used to playing a CONCACAF, you get the expression being CONCACAF'd. We CONCACAF'd them for once, Duane. It's us we did it to them for once. It's almost sweeter, especially with the goal that they scored at the 80th minute where we thought we were done. Just from, what's the expression? The ecstasy of
the agony of defeat to the old we're screwing that up completely. It's the wide world of sports. Maybe we can clip that. We'll find a clip of that and get that on so we can get it properly in there between the bumper here. There's your project, Kevin. You can bumper the wide world of sports intro. All right. Now, I hate to be the cold water here, but the other topic of the day, which basically engulfed my day for 12 hours yesterday, was the MLS CBA talks. And I don't think I need to remind Montrealers of what can happen to a great run if a strike happens and cancels it. So I'm, of course, alluding to the Expos having the best record in baseball in 1994 when the strike basically killed that franchise. I don't think a CCL cancellation from a strike would necessarily kill the Montreal Impact. I think that's a bit hyperbolic, but certainly it is of concern here on the day after that great result for the Impact that they may be in a very delicate and difficult situation in a week or so's time.
Hopefully not. It's the game's penciled in for around March 18 right now, so hopefully league and everybody can get things resolved. And there's some encouraging sign going on right now, but still there's conflicted sign too. Some signs are saying that we're close to a deal. Some signs are saying that they're close to a strike. So it's hard to figure out what's going on. Yeah,
as I said, spent a great deal of yesterday covering that, and we'll tell the story a little bit later on, but how my day went and sort of how the information. I think it's interesting how the information started to trickle out. I'm not trying to make myself part of the story, but I think that there is something of interest and note about how the information came out in one big slam at about 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon Eastern time. And it wasn't just me. There were a bunch of people that were hearing about this suddenly, and it seemed to correspond with the lunch break in negotiations. And I think that there was basically, on the players' side, an initiative that went out to call your agents and contact them to contact their people, because that's generally where you hear information from in these situations, or agents. And just all of a sudden everyone was hearing stuff where no one was hearing stuff before that. And that, to me, spoke to a strategic element by the players' front, because it wasn't long after that we started to hear movement from the owner's side in terms of the free agency. At any rate, we're going to get more into that in our middle segment. Before that, we have Kartik Krishnaiyer from World Soccer Talk on. Kartik, of course, anyone who's followed this game for any length of time knows Kartik. He was a former NASL communications director. He's deep roots in that part of the pyramid. He had a couple tweets yesterday that were interesting and kind of a different angle on the lockout strike situation. I keep mixing up the terms in my own head, even though I know them. Kartik was talking about what effect a potential strike would have on the USL. So we actually called to talk about that. We talk about that off the top first with him, but then we get into some more general stuff, and even he's down in Orlando, so we asked him a bit about that too. So, Kevin, without any further ado, let's bring Kartik on the line. We'll listen to that interview, then we'll come back, and Kevin and I will break it down a little bit more before we get into the more positive stuff about the Impact's win last night. And I actually, one last thing, I had a chance to talk to the Hearts of Oak people in New York City last night or yesterday afternoon, and I have that interview ready to go where they explain a little bit about their infamous recruitment pledge and form and all that sort of jazz. So that's in our show today as well. So we'll stop me talking now, and we'll bring that interview on.
The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat.
And welcome back to the Two Solitudes podcast. Duane Rollins here in Toronto, Kevin Laramie in Montreal. Kartik Krishnaiyer joins us from World Soccer Talk. Kartik, thanks for taking some time today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Kartik, we wanted to have you on because you had an interesting tweet yesterday about what you were hearing on a USL, NASL kind of level in terms of the USL reaching out to the NASL for potential players, loan players, if the MLS strike were to happen. Can you just elaborate on that and what kind of impact the strike might have and trickle down to the other levels of the soccer pyramid?
Yeah, USL teams are counting on having 5 MLS loan players, and they went along, most USL clubs from what I understand, until late last week, thinking, okay, things will be fine, we'll get players loaned from MLS, this labor dispute will be resolved. Towards the end of last week, several USL clubs, including clubs with direct ties to MLS clubs like Louisville City, which is directly tied to Orlando City in MLS, started inquiring with NASL clubs as to whether there was some availability for excess players because they weren't necessarily going to get the 5 or 6 or 7 players on loan if there's a strike, because the way this work is that if you're a striking player, you can't be loaned and registered to another club. Now, I'm not clear on whether if MLS clubs had loaned players, let's say 6 weeks ago to USL clubs, whether they would have been eligible to play, or if the teams that have reserve teams, direct reserve teams, LA Galaxy 2, Seattle Sounders 2, those sorts of clubs, Real Monarchs, if those players can be properly registered with the USL club without being on loan, I think maybe those guys will be able to play. But the guys that the Rochesters and the Louisvilles and the Charlestons and those sorts of clubs were depending on getting on loan from MLS clubs, they will not be able to take on loan if there is a strike.
Yeah, and for USL, of course, going through a leadership change right now, too, probably not helping the situation there in terms of stability. Right. But I know, just speaking quickly from a Canadian perspective, up here we have the standalone teams, that it would actually, if you think about it, put the young players, the academy players, the USL only contract players who aren't in the union, so they would be eligible to play, but it puts them in a really awkward situation because all of them want to eventually make MLS. That's their dream, and then they would be part of a union. So in essence, they would in some ways feel that they might be betraying their strike, their brothers, their labor brothers. I know people don't necessarily always think of sports disputes in a labor concept, but those factors play in. Anyway, Kartik, back to the questions. Just in terms of the NASL and their willingness to do that, do you feel that the NASL would support the USL in that way, considering sort of that they're kind of on opposite sides of this great soccer divide that we have now?
I think the league office would probably be opposed to it, but NASL teams are independent. That's part of the structural thing in NASL that's very different than Major League Soccer. And there are some NASL teams that will loan players to USL teams because they're young players that they want to see get games, or are just trying to offset salaries. So I could see clubs like Minnesota United or Tampa Bay loaning those two teams that have generally more money to spend than most of the other teams in the league that have excess players, that have full rosters, 25 to 30 players. Loan 1 or 2 guys to the USL teams, if not more guys, and maybe make them short-term loans so where guys can get recalled if the MLS work stoppage takes place and then it ends quickly, they can be recalled. So I think some teams will do it, quite honestly. Some NASL teams. Now, will the league look favorably upon it? Probably not. Although there is a certain degree of being magnanimous in all of this, where I think NASL, despite some of the bombast we've heard from Commissioner Peterson in the past and others associated with the league, the traffic sports people, I think at this point they want to appear above the fray and just let MLS continue to trip over itself in the midst of this labor struggle and some of the other bad PR things that have happened with Major League Soccer in the last year, some of Garber's misstatements, and also the Frank Lampard debacle, among other things.
If we're going back to yesterday, it was a crazy day in the negotiation. A lot of crazy numbers, crazy rumors were on the Twitters. If we're talking about the 32 years old, 10 years of experience in the same team, then you get the free agency. Crazy concepts appeared yesterday. What do you think was the goal of those concepts? Do you think it's the be-all, end-all? And do you think we're going to see some sort of freedom of movement? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think I'm actually surprised that the union's negotiating position has improved, because I was speculating with the former Players Union employee who remained nameless. There are only a few guys that are former employees, so some listeners might figure this out. But I was speculating with one of my sources, former Players Union employee, over the weekend, that MLS might be so dug in their position that the players would have no choice but to strike, because they made free agency the be-all and end-all. And he said to me that there would be no incentive for MLS to move on that position, because it would possibly open a Pandora's box for a challenge to single entity going forward, a legal challenge to single entity, or just knocking single entity completely when the next CBA negotiation takes place, whenever that will be down the road. We don't know what the length of the CBA that's being negotiated now will be. It can be 5 years, 7 years, 3 years, what it will be. But so I was surprised by that, Kevin, quite frankly. I mean, I thought it was a very surprising move by MLS. That having been said, it's not really free agency. Let's be honest about it. The 32-10, the 28-8, they're not really free agency.
Only Brad Davis. It only applies to Brad Davis so far.
Yeah, right. That was the only player that would apply to, and then I think the 28-8 would apply to about 20 players. Again, that's not. MLS is still trying to control wages. I think they're very concerned about the growth of wages in the game, in particular, what we've seen in Europe, particularly in England, and we're going to see it even more so in England now with the new TV contract that just got signed last week or 2 weeks ago in the Premier League. I think that their goal is to suppress wages any way they can, and if that is ultimately what they're going to continue to push the next day or two of negotiation, I think the players have no choice but to start the strike, because I want to stress this point, and obviously it's a fluid situation, and by the time people listen to this, it might be null and void what I'm about to say. But the union negotiators, Bob Foose and others, have had the reputation with some of the players in Major League Soccer for being too nice, too soft on MLS management, not getting the best deal for the players. There are players out there, some of them play even with their clubs, with Montreal and Toronto, that will look for better representation if this isn't done right this time. So that really boxes in Foose and his team to where if they don't get the right deal, they're going to have to strike. And if they do strike, the players will be behind them. But some of these more aggressive players who think that the representation hasn't been great, if they make the wrong deal, these guys might get a CBA done, but they might lose their jobs in the process. So that's there's internal things going on within the union and within the world of players. And I'm remarkably surprised and pleased from my perspective personally about the unity of the players. I was concerned about a lot of the foreign players when all of this started a few months ago. I was concerned that this would just end up being a fight for mid-level American and Canadian players, and that the players from the rest of the world that have come to MLS, and maybe some of even the young players and highly paid DP type players wouldn't be involved in this fight. But if you see even in Toronto, Michael Bradley is the most outspoken player pushing for some sort of change to MLS's system. So I'm pleasantly surprised and pleased by the player unity that we see.
Well, do you think there might be a divide, though? Because I've heard some rumors that some locker room might be divided in teams that want to go out and play and some teams that don't. If you read between the lines, some of the teams are heading to play really soon, if you know what I'm saying. So did you hear anything about maybe a divide in some teams' locker room or maybe in the union itself, the players' union?
Yeah, I think, okay, so there's a couple considerations here. I think first off, you have different agents in the mix. So the players' union reps are very tied to the Wasserman agency. You've got guys like Ron Waxman, Richard Motskin, Lyle York, Pat McCabe. You have a bunch of other agents that represent players. For example, Michael Bradley is represented by Waxman, as is his net, Coach Bob Bradley. So I think that's causing some of the divide, because I think there are some agents who are telling their players they can get a better deal than what these reps are giving them. And then there's some other players who are loyal to the union or loyal to the agent, to their agent, who are saying, okay, if we're still negotiating, we should be playing. We played through the preseason. We went through training camp. We were in a CBA negotiation there. MLS is giving a little bit. I think there's also the ultimate concern, guys, about foreign players. And especially players from Latin America, will they see this kind of labor dispute, very typically Western labor dispute, as something that is worth it for them after they miss a paycheck or two? Obviously, the strike fund will cover them for a while. But once they begin to miss a paycheck or they're not playing, will they then buckle the system? And that gives the owners leverage in breaking a strike potentially. I think the players from Europe are pretty united. I mean, obviously, Robbie Keane has been very outspoken in promoting the need to strike if a deal isn't reached. I think the other players from Europe understand, particularly from guys kind of Western European, Northern European countries, understand that these sorts of labor disputes and the need to stick together with other players, even if it doesn't affect them directly. But there could be some cracks with players from Latin America. And again, I think a big part of this is the major beneficiaries will be mid-level American and Canadian players. I think that's pretty obvious.
Kartik, I wanted to take it in a slightly different direction here. I saw another tweet that you sent out this morning, which spoke to me a lot as someone who does support the NASL the best I can, loves USL, loves all levels of the game, just want the whole pyramid just to get along a little better and work together for the betterment of the sport in both countries. You had indicated that you're seeing a lot of NASL fans that are eager almost for an MLS strike. Speak to that. Speak to them. Why is it wrong for someone outside of the MLS fandom to want this to happen?
Well, I actually, just to clarify that a little bit, I know tweets are somewhat difficult to interpret because they're 140 characters. If they're rooting for a strike because they want the players to have a better deal and more of a more of a say in their own state as professionals, I'm all for that. I mean, I will just come out and say I am for the players striking if they don't get the right deal. As much as it pains me because my semi-local club, Orlando City, which I've been to Orlando a lot on business and actually had relocated there for a couple months, just late last year, is going to have this massive 65,000, 70,000 game debut game in MLS. Obviously, they were in USL Pro the last 4 seasons, but debut MLS game. But I think if they don't get the deal they need to strike, even if that means that game never takes place. And it's some low-key debut game they have in a couple of months. But my concern is I think there are a lot of NASL fans. I know it's on Twitter, particularly Cosmos fans, guys. I mean, let's be blunt about it. That want to see MLS go out of business. They want to see clubs go under. They want to see the league fail. I mean, they'll use all kinds of justifications about single entity and a cartel and no promotion and relegation, but they don't seem to care if this displaces hundreds of players, thousands of staff, and essentially hundreds of thousands of soccer fans. And the rhetoric is such that they want to just be Major League Soccer. They want anything Major League Soccer does, they take shots at. Now, when I worked at the NASL, we really weren't in that mindset. Yeah, we had a different business model. We took our shots at MLS at times, but we were very much into kind of promoting our own product, getting to a certain point before we started to aggressively challenge MLS in this way. That culture has kind of changed. I'll admit since I left. I think it's part of the reason I'm not there anymore. But I'm concerned by what I see from some NASL fans because they're almost willing to strike, hoping it means the league collapses. Now, if they were willing to strike to help players, I would have a completely different opinion. In fact, I mean, I think you could argue that if the players get the right deal out of the CBA, and again, I think they're probably going to have to strike to get the best deal they can get. They might sign a CBA deal that is as good as it should be to avoid a strike, but they might probably have to strike to get the deal they really need. That would really probably hurt the NASL long term as far as attracting players, because there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys at the bottom end of the MLS pyramid that have turned down offers in MLS to sign in NASL for slightly more money. In fact, I had a correspondence this morning with someone at an NASL team who basically told me they have 4 players that they've signed in the last 2 seasons who left Major League Soccer because they were offered less money. Now, of course, they were offered less money by a team that had their rights when their contract expired. If they had free agency, a real free agency, those guys wouldn't be in the NASL. They would be playing somewhere else in Major League Soccer. So I think if the CBA deal is the right deal for the players, it could potentially hurt NASL.
Kartik, let's move to your local situation. You mentioned that Orlando is kind of your local team there. Certainly you have a good understanding of that market. You do, I think, probably have enough interactions with the fans there to have a good concept of what the feeling is. Just how much would it hurt the market's launch? I know that they were in the USL Pro before, obviously, but how much would it hurt the launch of the MLS side if the game is ultimately canceled? Would they lose fans?
Wow, that's a really good question, because I've spent a lot of time in Orlando the last couple of weeks as this has been going on. I've actually talked with a number of my friends who are in their supporters groups face to face about the labor dispute, because they figure I know more than they do and understand it. So I've actually kind of educated some of them on it. I think the conclusion I would come to is that the casual fans that are going to come to its first game, they might tail off a bit if there's a work stoppage. But they're not going to lose their hardcore fans. And a lot of the hardcore fans were stunned because they thought, look, they know, a lot of them knew the players when they were in USL. They knew how little they were making. And they were stunned when I told them the salary structure and the restrictions in Major League Soccer. They assumed, now they didn't assume they were going to like a Premier League level of payment, but they just kind of assumed it would be like the NHL or Major League Baseball in the level of pay, except for the top players. I mean, and they all know the salary Kaká's making. So they thought, okay, and they know Shea's making a nice salary coming back from England. So they thought that was generally the level that guys would pay that. And there was free agency because they've signed all these players, right? Now, of course, Orlando has signed a majority of their players from outside Major League Soccer, by the way. Besides the guys that they got in the expansion draft. And they wheeled and dealed a little bit to make trades. But I had to explain to some of their fans that they didn't actually sign anyone who was a quote free agent, who was available, who had played in Major League Soccer last year if they didn't make a trade or they weren't made available in the expansion draft. And then once you point that out to some of their fans, they're like, yeah, this is really not what we thought we were getting ourselves into. Will it blunt the team's momentum? Yeah. Can it be regained? I think probably be regained. They may not get 70,000 at a rescheduled opener, but I think they could get 60,000 or so. And it's interesting. I'm hearing that Orlando City and New York City FC are the two teams really pushing MLS management to get a deal done. I thought maybe New York City FC, because of the Lampard situation, would just, at the potential of them signing Xavi this summer, which has been strongly rumored, that they might just be okay with the strike for a little bit. But they seem to have promoted their opener also. And I guess in New York, it might actually be more critical than Orlando. If you have promoted your opener and then you lose fans in New York, it's not like Orlando where there's not a whole lot else going on soccer-wise to get people back. In New York, then people are watching the Premier League again, they're watching La Liga, they're doing whatever they do, and you might never get them back.
Absolutely, Kartik. One last question before we wrap this up. Is the season going to start on time or not?
Well, if you had asked me at this time yesterday, I would have said no. Today, I'm going to say there's a 50-50 chance. I think that there's some progress in the movement, in the negotiations, progress in movement in the negotiations. I'm still not convinced, though, that the players are going to get a deal that gets ratified. There might even be a situation where some of the union reps in that room sign off on a deal, and they go back to the players for a vote, and the players say this isn't adequate because we need free agents and we need some sort of real bump in terms of potential wages we could make, especially if the CBA is in place for 5 years. Then there'll be a problem. So I'm going to take 50-50 right now. I know that's really sitting on the fence, but as I said, if you would ask me, you would have me on yesterday, I would have said, no, this is not starting on time. So there's some progress, but I'm not prepared to say it will start on time yet.
Absolutely, Kartik. So, Kartik Krishnaiyer from World Soccer Talk, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Two Solitudes Soccer Podcast with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie. You can reach the guys on Twitter at 24th Minute and at Kev Laramie. Email twosolitudespodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to the show on Stitcher, iTunes, Feedburner, Podbay, Player. Yeah, listen to the show. Now listen to us flow. Yeah, Northern hospitality. That's how we do. Now back to the show.
And welcome back. Thanks, Kartik, again for that. Lots of good information getting out in the last day or so. Like I said, Kevin, it all blew up around 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and this is after several weeks of quiet. And it was always going to happen this way because MLS...
You scared me yesterday, Duane. I have to say, you scared the bejesus out of me.
Yeah, well, the first information we were getting, like I woke up yesterday to the information that there's potentially more money coming into the strike fund, and I was talking about that on Twitter and in other places during the day, and that eventually led into me talking to a few of the agents and so on and so forth, and no one's interested in the process of how I work, but at the same time, as I said in the intro, I think there was something of note with how quickly everything came out around 1 o'clock, and like I said, I think that was strategic on the players' front because they wanted to get it out there that they were willing and ready to walk away. So as soon as that pressure point came in, a lot of the owners were at the table, but those that aren't start to read this thing, whether it be, me, I doubt, but other people are talking about this. They start to see this. The fans start to read this. They start to call their ticket brokers. It starts to ramp up the pressure on the clubs. So the clubs at that point say, okay, if they're willing to walk away, we're going to need to put our deal on the table. And it's it's like chess, right? Like a negotiation. They're not going to put their best deal forward first. Like no one's going to go, oh, here's the bank, take it. They're going to try and gradually work their way to a deal. When the first deal, and you mentioned it to Kartik in the interview, the 32-10 deal went on the table, everyone just started laughing because it was so absurd.
Laughing and being like, that's like only Brad Davis. After people took hours to figure out if there was any players that could benefit from it, and if it was to pass, only Brad Davis in 2016 would qualify, and that's if he stays with Houston for another 2 years.
45% of the league's teams would not have any player on the team that could possibly qualify because they literally have not been in the league 10 years, and that includes Toronto FC, which seems to be in the league forever at this point in time. But yeah, so it was just an absurd starting point. But the very first thing that came to me, and I talked to someone who on the labor side of things to help me understand labor issues, and they threw it at me right away that this was a good sign that they put it on there. Forget what the deal is. Obviously, it's junk. It's a hilariously bad offer. But at the same time, the fact that they put free agency on the table was a massive step forward. And to me, regardless of what happens from this point forward, I think the players won the negotiations. They won the battle that day. I hate to put it in black and white win-loss situations, but the fact that they held firm and got the owners to finally start to work and negotiate on some form of freer movement is an absolute victory for the players, and one that I don't think a lot of people expected a few weeks ago.
One thing that I think is really interesting is you mentioned at the top of this segment how there's some rumors that the strike fund can be supplemented by other allies in a way. Is that going to happen, and could that affect the negotiation drastically, Duane?
Yeah, absolutely. If it was known, and again, even the way that that's leaking out without official confirmation speaks to strategic ideas, right? Like they just want to plant the idea. Even it might not even be true. It might, like I fully admitted a couple times on Twitter yesterday, and I want to be clear about this now, that when you're dealing with negotiations like this, and if you've ever covered politics before, as I have, I covered one of the Six Nations land dispute a few years ago. We'll go back close to a decade now, which some people may be familiar with here when they took over the landfill in Caledonia and blah, blah, blah. But at any rate, the point I'm making is when you deal in those situations, when you have two sides that are there's a lot of politics going on, there's a lot to lose and gain there, that you as a reporter can often be used. And I don't even use that term used negatively. I mean, they are trying to best use you for their benefit. So they will tell you information that benefits you. And that's something that you process and understand when you're trying to report, but you still report it. People mistake when you report stuff, they think you're being naive and thinking it's true. I don't necessarily think everything I report is true. What I think is that it's true to what I was told. You know what I mean? Like, I'm accurately reporting what I'm told, and it's up to you as the reader listener to interpret that with the understanding that they are using media sources to try and get their story out and just get their story spun in their right way. And all you can do as a middleman in this, and it's exactly what you are, is just try and accurately put it out there and make sure that people understand where it's coming from. In my cases, it was almost universally, and it was universally, pardon me, coming from the player side of things and mostly from player agents. However, I got off track a little bit here in terms of your original question. Yeah, it absolutely would factor into a thing, because if the players have a large strike fund, they can hold out for a while. And if they believe that, if the owners believe that and believe that they can shut the league down for 2-3 months, we're not talking a week here, then that really does start to affect their bottom line. The owners, as much as they don't want to lose this opening weekend for Orlando, New York City, they can afford a week-long lockout, I think, or strike, I should say. They could afford that. They could absorb that. This hysterical sky is falling stuff out there about how the league's going to collapse and it's going to be a disaster they could never overcome from if they shut down one weekend is absurd. Of course they'd overcome that. Half bluntly, people, a great deal of folks that go to MLS games are barely aware the league's playing for the first few months of the year. It's a summer league in a lot of ways still. That's something they want to fix, but it's still not really going to affect those people coming to games in the summer. So they can afford a week-long lockout or strike. I don't know why I keep saying lockout today. They can afford a week-long strike, but they can't afford a long one. And I think that the fact that they're putting that on the table, these offers of free agency on the table, of free movement on the table now, is indicative of the idea that maybe they do believe that there's a larger strike fund out there than what is being reported in the labor filings.
Absolutely, and now it's going to be interesting to see. There's rumors that today that some travel are being done by teams, so that's another good point that you could say, Duane.
Yeah, Chicago has left, and I had a lot of people tweeting at me just before the show went on. We started to record the show today about how it's a good sign Chicago's flying out. It is a good sign. It would be a terrible sign if they weren't flying out. Yeah. Is what I'll say.
Bad sign.
Yeah, that'd be a really bad sign. But I don't necessarily view it as like, oh, okay, well, things are going to get worked out just because Chicago took off. The union, is not rich, but it's in the sense of in comparison to other players' unions, but it's not dead poor either. It can afford to charter those guys back to Chicago. That's not, or pay their plane fare. Like, they'll get them home. Don't worry, guys. So it's not necessarily an absolute case that they're going out. It's just a case that they're still talking. And yesterday at 1 o'clock, the news that we were getting is that maybe they were going to walk away yesterday afternoon. That was the first thing that we heard, is that something's happening now and the players are prepared to make a major move. And whether they did make that major move in the room, that's possible. They said, if you don't offer us free agency after this lunch break, we're walking away. And the owners went away for an hour and came back and said, okay, they're serious and did offer something. That could have been what happened and what we were hearing. And then once that happened, that gave the negotiations the momentum to continue through the night, and they did go very late into the night. There were a couple reporters down there, including Aaron Stoller, who we've had on here before, or on the other show, I guess it wasn't it, Kevin?
Yep, well, we had him on both, I think.
Yeah, well, anyway, he was camped out there. He was complaining about how cold it was in D.C., and he stood outside the building all day, so good for Aaron. However, there were people camping out there, and they went late into the night, and they're going right now, too. So the fact that Chicago took off, what that is indicative of, or indicates of, what that indicates is that the talks are still going. The moment they break down is the moment that things start to get troublesome. There was apparently going to be a strike vote either last night or tonight. We haven't heard that confirmed yet. I'm sure that there probably was. This is modern times. They can do a strike vote. They probably have a secured server online that they do a vote like that for, some kind of internet way. So they did that. I have no doubt that the vote will go forward. I mean, there was one player that voted against the potential of striking when they first did the vote. So I doubt there's been much change in that direction. Certainly not to be anywhere close to a problem minority in there. There will be a strike vote. Once that happens, the negotiations, the executive crew can walk away at any time, and I think that's probably the situation that they're going to find themselves in today as these talks continue. Kevin, I think we'll wrap it up by talking about the latest deal as reported by Jeff Carlisle and Taylor Twellman were the two guys that got the information out, two different parts of information which are equally relevant. With the latest deal on the table, according to league sources to owner sources, as far as I can tell. I don't want to speak for what Jeff and Taylor are talking to, but that seemed like what they were by reading between the lines. 28.8 is the magic number we're talking about right now, that apparently that the owners are offering free movement, and they're not even calling it free agency. It's freer movement after when players are 28 years of age and have played 8 years in MLS. Now, that's a major movement from that 32-10, because 32-10 was 32 years of age, which is, obviously 4 years older, and 10 years with one club. Yeah. So that there's one major concession right there. Now, on the surface, that looks like a fair deal to a lot of people, but when you start to really break it down, and then you add Twellman's piece to it, which is that they would also cap a raise in their salary to 10%, which in effect would make it the same system as they're having now, Kevin, just dressed up pretty. Right? Like, it's called free agency, but it's not. Think about it. Like, logic this out for a second. If you are a player that is demanding attention from another team, that means you're competent, right?
Yeah.
If you're competent, you're going to get a raise because you probably should. Yeah, you're going to get your fair market value anyway. 10% is probably not what that is. It might be in some cases, but in most cases, it's probably not. It's probably they're going to get a significant raise.
True, but if you play devil's advocate for a second, would it be a bigger raise for not a majority, but for a big part of some players that would just maybe deserve a smaller raise? I don't know. I don't want to say deserve because it's probably not the right word, but at their fair market value would not probably be 10%. So if you're just looking at the roster fillers of this world. Yeah,
but I don't think that's who you're looking at. You're looking at the mid earner guys, and the point I'm making is if you're not worth a 10% raise, you're probably not going to demand free agent attention. That's the point I'm making. And beyond that, what will happen in this, if they were to adopt a system like that, what would essentially happen is the players they would go from this current like cloak and dagger system to a system that's a little more upfront, so that's good. But what it would be is a trade or a sign and trade system. So players would end up signing contracts with their current team and then hope that they could be traded to the team that they wanted to go to. That's exactly what would happen because they would want to get paid their market value. So player X is playing for TFC, he's making $110,000. He is by MLS sort of fair market value worth $180,000. He signs a contract with TFC for $180,000, but he wants to play in Vancouver because his family's from there. So suddenly he's at the mercy of Vancouver and Toronto working a deal out. That's almost exactly how it works now, where players, especially players that go out of the league and try and come back in, which it doesn't really address either. They'd still be held hostage by teams needing to give up an asset to get them. They need to get rid of that concept where for players out of your contract that you're giving up assets to get them. If players out of contract, you either sign them or you let them walk. That's a really fair concept in a lot of ways that MLS doesn't seem able to get around. And the other thing about this 10% drag is that it's not needed. It's a salary capped league. You can't blow the budget on, well, you can if you want, but you're an idiot. You won't play it. You're like, what are you going to do? Pay $5 million for Dan Gargan or something? Come on. No, you're not going to make a guy like that. $5 million is exaggeration, obviously. You're not going to make Dan Gargan a max player. You're going to pay him market value. Otherwise, you're a moron, and you deserve what you get. And it's not like every team in the league is going to be doing that to drive the Dan Gargan salaries of the world up through the roof. If one guy every so often is overpaid, then so be it, because there's going to be 10 other guys that are paid market value.
Absolutely, but that brings me to mind a practice that we see often in the NBA, Duane, where a player will sign a new contract with a team, but it's called a sign and trade. They're free agent, but they negotiate with everyone, but they sign with their own club, so that club would get a value in exchange for them to trade them right away. Is that something that could be a possibility in Major League Soccer, so that it would maybe not escalate the salary as much as basic free agency?
Yeah, with the NBA's sign and trade bit, it's similar. The NBA is a bit different in the sense that, and I'm not an NBA cap expert, but I do know a little bit about this. essentially they allow players to sign longer terms at their current clubs and to give them a slightly higher raise. Now we're talking about figures that are not even close to what MLS players are making, of course.
It's a different scale,
But there are incentives to get players to stay in their same market because they want to promote stability and promote fan engagement and things like that. And that's fine. I think there is room within an MLS free agency system or freer movement system. I think we got to stop calling it free agency, because I don't think what's going to come out in this is going to be a true free market, but something that exactly just allows a little bit more movement rights. However, I think there is room for something to make it incentives so that they stay, but at the same time, 10%, it's pretty restrictive there.
So there's going to be a freedom of movement draft. How much you want to bet on it, knowing the league?
Yeah.
Every July 1st, every year, or close to this, every January 1st, you'll get the freedom draft, where players who want to have free agency put the name in the ballot, and there's a draft.
Yeah, well, I don't think the players want to have a draft, though. That's exactly what they want to avoid, right?
I'm saying it tongue-in-cheek, but yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think that the bottom line here is that the owners have shown some movement in the last 24 hours, so it's whether the hardliners back off a little bit. What is the magic number? I've heard some people sort of bantered around that 28 is probably still a little too old in soccer terms, because soccer players tend to peak and have their peak earning years a little bit earlier than, like, 28 is kind of, it's a hockey number, right? Like, that's, I don't know if they're pulling it from hockey. They might be emulated in the NHL because it's very similar to the NHL figures. I think the NHL is 27 and 7 if memory serves, but I'm not 100% sure. It might need to be a little bit lower, but I think that they need to drop the cap. And I suspect what I've heard, and I'm speculating now to be clear, that if it was 28 or 8, and if they factored in, what happens if a player, they're going to need to include USL play if they're under an MLS contract with that, if they're going to have a year's service requirement in there, because otherwise teams could simply send a player down for a day and break up his consecutive service, right? Mm-hmm. There's lots of different loopholes that they need to close in that before they signed it off, and I'm sure that they're talking about these things inside. We just aren't hearing about them. And all this said, this is just one major factor. They still have to work out the cap, and they have to work out roster spots, and they have to work out what they're doing with the USL players, and there's so many other factors that have to go into a CBA. I think at this point in time, the idea that we're going to have a completed and ready CBA by the weekend is not realistic. It's not going to happen. What we might happen is an agreement in principle, and that's what really we're working towards now. I suspect they will be playing under a handshake agreement for a while, and they're going to have a lot of work to put together all the nuts and bolts of an agreement. But yesterday morning, I lost a lot of hope, and I said by the afternoon that I placed the strike possibility at 95%. I backed a bit down from that now, but I still think that we are hovering around 75% likelihood unless we hear about significant movement this morning. I think today is the key day, though, Kevin. If they're still talking by this time tomorrow morning, I think that's a really good sign. Because I think that if things are truly going to break down, it's going to happen this afternoon or tonight, and that the players would then just walk away.
We'll see. Time will tell.
Time will tell. All right, let's take a really quick break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to put the blinders on, and we're going to pretend that everything's normal and have a nice conversation about the CCL and about the Hearts of Oak supporters group at NYCFC.
What happened after that for you?
I was running around in circles. I was thinking, man, if I run all the way up there and celebrate with them, am I going to be able to get back? I don't make runs like that in the game, so I was huffing and puffing, but the adrenaline just took over, and it was a special moment for everybody, for sure.
The penalty happened after, but how big was that save for you that you made? Was it the biggest one of your career?
The moment, for sure. There's certainly better saves that I can think about, but in that moment, what it meant at that point to continue the game 0-0, it was probably the biggest moment of my career, for sure.
How did you see that play on the penalty? What's your standpoint on that?
It's CONCACAF referees. I mean, they're going to look to give it to you anytime they can. It's unfortunate because I was speaking with the referee in English at the start of the game, and all of a sudden when the penalty was called. He didn't speak English to me anymore, but he was laughing with the penalty kick taken that was taken. So it's unfortunate, and hopefully something can be sorted out with that down the road. But you expect that kind of kick.
You had a perfect view kind of the last play on third with Alice to order. I mean, what you see, and you appreciate the quality of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few guys, definitely on this team and definitely in this league, that can play that ball at Cameron play. You can smash the ball for sure. He played a perfectly weighted ball into Cameron. Cameron, a guy playing his second professional game ever, takes an unbelievable touch, keeps his balance, and has unbelievable composure when everything's on his shoulders to put the game away and put us in the semifinal. So I'm extremely happy for that guy because he works hard and he's a good kid.
What has he been doing? What has he been doing so well to be able to have such an important role in this?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, when he came on the field in Pachuca, it was a bit surprising, but he's a guy that works hard, and you understood why he came on the field. He chased down balls, he extended the game for us, and the same thing today. And now he showed a little bit of his quality in that touch of the finish. So he's got a great career ahead of him. He's a kid with a good head on his shoulders too. So he'll keep working hard, and he'll make something of himself for sure.
What did you think of the fan support today?
Oh, fantastic. When you're in the moment of the game, I don't really notice what's going on in the stands. At one point, I looked around and I didn't even notice in the first half that there was people in the upper deck. And then when I saw that, it was fantastic. And they stayed strong the whole game. Even when we got down 1-0, they pushed us. We got that goal. It was fantastic. I don't think anybody here is going to forget that.
And welcome back. And look, we have a bit of a lighter interview that I did yesterday, and in some ways it doesn't necessarily fit because we have the CCL to talk about and all this, but I did have the opportunity to talk to the guys that are involved in organizing, which we made fun of a little bit in the last show, and I think it's only fair, and a lot of people have been making fun of them and sort of teasing them and throwing this application form that's been out there forever out there as this hilarious thing and portraying them in a certain way, that it's only fair that we give them an equal time. And I had a conversation with Johnny Flanagan yesterday, who's a member of Hearts of Oak, who was involved in the initial days of this. He's a really good guy. And it sounds to me, after having a conversation with these guys, that they're just MLS fans and they're being a bit misconstrued. So let's have a conversation, or show that conversation now. It's about 10 minutes. I think it's a really enjoyable thing. Talks about supporter stuff, talks about NYCFC. It's a nice little conversation I had yesterday. It's going to get you in a better mood after all of that CBA talk. And then Kevin and I will come back and we will talk about the Impact thing that happened last night.
And welcome back to the Two Solitudes podcast. Duane Rollins here with Johnny Flanagan, who's a member of the Hearts of Oak supporters group for NYCFC. Johnny, thanks for taking some time today.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because there's been a lot of, I guess, jokes that have been out there the last week or so about this application form for membership for the Hearts of Oak, and we actually had a little light fun at its expense on our last show. So I thought it was fair to bring someone on and just tell us, what any misperceptions we're having about that are, and to let us know what you guys are all about. So why don't we start there and talk about that application form? Is it current? And, if it isn't, can you kind of tell us what things look like now?
Yeah, it's not current. It was very early on at the beginning. When you're talking about our current membership application, there's just a couple of questions. We're looking for somebody to be sponsored by a current member of Hearts of Oak, and why they should be a member of the Hearts of Oak. We want to know that. They just let us know. And that's pretty much it. After that, we just say we encourage our members to share the experience of all the supporter groups in the city. And that's kind of the way we're looking at it.
All right. So you're not trying to be some kind of exclusive club then?
No, not at all. That first thing that got out was it's kind of a crazy atmosphere in New York City right now. We've got a lot of excitement, and there's a lot of people that are like, we want to start a group, and we do. And we had kind of a small group of people that were thinking, how can we do this right? So we kept it kind of close to the vest. We were thinking, all right, we've got a few guys. Let's just build super slow for that first, 10 or so people. And that's when that thing leaked out really early on. We had no intention on keeping it for the long run. It was just to kind of protect ourselves a little bit because we were a little hesitant because the atmosphere is so crazy.
Do you think that part of the reason that it caught so much attention and became such a almost a meme almost in MLS circles for a while.
Sure.
It has to do with an instinct to sort of poke fun at NYCFC whenever possible by some fans of other MLS teams.
Absolutely. And you know what? If I was a fan of those other teams, I would have shared it. I mean, let's be honest. You know, we're the new guys. We're in the city that people love to hate. You know, we've got everybody knows our deal with Manchester City, so I get it. And you know what? In most part, it is good fun. I mean, it's all part of it. You know when you get involved in a supporter group that you're going to have enemies pretty much as soon as you say that you're a supporters group. So it's fine.
I guess the other question I have, and previously on the show, we talked to the Third Rail guys and about their experience and why they formed and things like that. So just why did you feel that that wasn't for you and that you folks felt you needed to go a different direction?
Yeah, you know, I mean, the Third Rail's got a place in this thing. I mean, they've got 1,700 members. That's incredible. We've got, you know, we're going to be happy to support the club alongside Third Rail. A lot of our guys are in Section 238, which is literally one section over. So we're planning on coexisting just fine and supporting the team together. With Hearts of Oak, you know, we just wanted something a little bit different, a little bit more personal maybe. You know, it's one of those things where most of our members are going to become members by meeting us as opposed to, you know, let's say an internet transaction. You know, you can't be a member by just a PayPal transaction, and that's no shot at Third Rail at all. That's just, we're just trying something more personal, you know, like a slower, more kind of grassroots approach.
So you think they're more of a big tent and you're more of a like-minded individuals find each other situation?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's tough to kind of pinpoint it. You know, we're not going to have 1,700 members at any point. You know what I mean? Like and we're not aspiring to, and we're proud of the fact that next door they've got that. You know, we just want more of a, you know, just kind of a more comfortable, you know, like these are our guys. Like I'm going to go into, we're going to have we're having a watch party at the Newburgh Brewery on the weekend. And when we walk in there, you know, we want to know everybody that's in that room kind of. You know what I mean?
Fair enough. Let's move a bit away from the supporters group stuff and look at the team and sort of your evolution as a fan. Tell me a little bit about yourself as a fan. And in this point, you would be speaking for yourself rather than for the group. I think we all understand that.
Sure.
How did you get into the game? And I guess the pertinent question here is how come not the Red Bulls?
Well, I'm a Spurs supporter. I've been a Tottenham Hotspur supporter for a while. So right away, I can't root for a team in red. It's just ingrained in me. I know that's not the answer most people expect. You know, they're going to get this long-winded thing. No, I can't root for red. I couldn't root for Thierry Henry. It's really that simple for me.
Okay, so you just were looking for a team. Are you in the city itself, or is that are you not located there?
I'm a little bit north of the city. I spend a lot of time in the city. I work in the city. You know, my teams are all from New York City, so you know, I gravitate towards the teams that represent the city. You know, the Red Bulls feel a little bit like New Jersey's team, which is fine. You know, I think they should probably just own it like the Devils do and become New Jersey's team. But, you know, I'm digressing a little bit. But, you know, yeah, it's a blue team and it's in my city, so it makes sense for me.
Personally, I think they should rebrand as just the Metro Bulls without a city attached to it, and that would solve all the problems. But we have a...
That would solve everything.
At any rate...
They should.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of history there. But
yeah,
you mentioned you're a Spurs fan, so you know, those that listen to me long enough know that I support the team in blue that owns your team. So that's why I come into interest with this to NYC a little bit more than most. But
sure.
How are you able to get past that? Because that's a concern a lot of people had when they named it that you know, City Light or whatever. Like, how are you able to get past that as a Spurs supporter?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. At first, when it was first announced that it was Manchester City, it was like, oh, man, really? I mean, I didn't have a huge problem with City. They're not, you know, a direct rival of Spurs other than the fact that, you know, they might be both trying to be in the top four. Although one of the teams involved has been in the top four a little more than the other one recently. You know, it's less about that to me and more about the fact that it's our team in our city. You know, it just kind of became secondary when you hang out with the supporters and you see the energy with the guys. You know, it becomes more about the city that it's from, not the owner. I mean, there's scumbag owners that own teams all over the planet. You know, we have Manchester City. There's a lot of good that comes with that. You know, I mean, we've got academies that are as good as any in the world and scouts all over the planet. I mean, there's a benefit to being in that city football group. So it's not all bad. And to be honest, it doesn't mean that much to me.
Fair enough. And in fairness, the Third Rail guys sort of said the same thing, and I have yet to talk to any of you folks that actually support Manchester City. Are there any that support Manchester City that have come along?
Yeah, we've got a few guys that have been City fans. One of my good friends has been a City fan for a long time. And, I mean, he's excited. He's thrilled. That's kind of a home run situation. You're from New York and you're a Manchester City fan. It doesn't get any better than that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess I could ask you about Frank Lampard. It's been a while now, but was that something that upset you or concerned you? Obviously, it might have upset you as an NYCFC fan, but did it concern you about being a trend, or do you think it was a one-off?
No, you look at a situation like how many guys are Frank Lampard. You don't think that kind of situation is going to present itself. We're never going to be in our first year. Frank Lampard's never going to be one of our first big signings ever again. You know what I mean? This is like a one-time situation. Now, I could see players going back and forth. It's not going to be the same scenario that we're dealing with now. So that's how I'm looking at it. It's a one-off. It doesn't surprise me. If I was Frank Lampard, I mean, I wouldn't blame him. He's chasing Champions League glory. Was chasing Champions League glory, So it's like, I don't blame him.
Because they could turn it around.
I'd do the same thing.
They could turn it around to Camp Nou.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. That's a tough one.
Humor me on that one.
They do. Why not? Yeah, good for them. I mean, really though, a lot of people that have a problem with it, put yourself in Frank's shoes. At his age, he's got a chance to win a Champions League title win a Premier League title and have glory in the Champions League. I don't begrudge him that.
Fair enough. I will end it with this. I mean, I talked to you at a weird time. I've been chasing the CBA stories all afternoon, and unfortunately things are looking a little bit dire there right now, but I think things can change quick in a CBA negotiation. Anyone who's been involved at any level knows that. But let's talk worst case for a second. How much would that hurt the launch of the club, do you think?
I think it would be a really big deal. A very negative situation. We've got there's a lot of energy right now. There's a lot of stuff building on, from a successful World Cup. We've got more viewers in the city than we've probably ever had. To stop that momentum now would be devastating. I don't think that it's exaggeration to say that either. We've got guys. I mean, the energy that's been put into not just Hearts of Oak, but Third Rail, and the hours spent getting everything up and running for it to not stop. I mean, you're talking about almost 2,000 people that are putting their heart into it, just in the supporter section of New York City. I mean, that's a big deal. That's no small thing.
Fair enough. I suppose I should ask you about the name. A lot of people are confused with the name. So could you explain the origin of the name Hearts of Oak?
Sure. It actually started, there's a few different things that have been associated with the name. Initially, the thing that brought us to it first is a little piece of New York City history. Alexander Hamilton was part of a militia that helped get New York City on the American side of things right before the Revolutionary War. And so we kind of latched on to the old school New York City militia in 1775. And then from there, when you've got a couple of artists in our group, and a lot of guys getting excited, like what else is out there? We found references of Hearts of Oak on Blackbeard's ship and in Odysseus' stories and Aeneas, and it's just been really interesting.
If you look at the names of the supporters group across the leagues, there seems to be a lot of history buffs. There are MLS supporters clubs out there, a lot of reference and military history buffs actually. Last question. Let's think positively for a second, and you're going to be watching the game on Sunday. Is there a place people are gathering, supporters and people that want to maybe meet other supporters on Sunday to watch that game?
Yeah, we've actually got two places. Our group is divided a little bit with guys that live right in the city, and then a decent amount of us live north of New York City. For the guys that are north of New York City in the Hudson Valley, we're going to be at the Newburgh Brewing Company in Newburgh. We're going to be there early in the afternoon and then get ready for kickoff at 5 o'clock. They actually normally close at Sunday at 5, and they're staying open for us, so we're pretty excited about that. And then in Brooklyn, there's a soccer bar called Banter, which is an incredible place. It's where our city guys will be. They're going to be down there with Brown Bag Social Club, which is another group of hardcore soccer fans who like good beer. We've got groups that like good beer and like soccer and want to watch it together. That's about as good as it gets, right?
Fair enough. Yeah, well, that's how we all got into the game eventually. All right, shoot us your Twitter handle, and then we'll say goodbye.
You got it. Hearts of Oak is at Hearts of Oak NYC, and my personal one is at Johnny_F.
All right. Thanks for taking some time today, and I hope you have a good season.
My pleasure, man. Thank you so much. You too.
Cameron, when you first came to Montreal, a second-round draft pick, maybe thinking questioning maybe even whether you're going to be here, be with this team, playing soccer professionally, and you go out there today and score. It's one of the best goals I've seen. So that was just kind of going. What went through your mind? It seemed like you didn't know what was going on. It seemed like you were in dreamland.
I mean, slight correction there. I was actually a third-round draft pick, so it's okay. You know, it's more impressive. I mean, when I saw the ball coming to me, what went through my head for all the practices leading up to this, coming from the veterans, they're just always saying, don't be tense, relax on the ball, like be ready for your moment and seize that opportunity. And I mean, the opportunity came, and the same as in college, just got to put the ball in the net. So be calm, touch it through.
No, ça va, même question. Right?
That might be the biggest goal in the team's history. Has it kind of hit you yet what that meant?
I mean, now it is, now that you say that. I was saying earlier, when I think back on my 4 years at Princeton, I think if you add up all the fans I've ever had, it doesn't even come close to what was in this stadium today. And so to do that out there it's a dream come true.
The quality of that play was very high.
No, I think it comes down to Callum's ball. He sets me up like that, take a touch past the defender, and it's my job to finish it.
Can you just describe that moment when the ball was in and just run to the crowd?
Sheer ecstasy. I scored, didn't even know how to celebrate, so I just started running, basically. And everyone piles on top of you, and you find it hard to breathe. And that's pretty much what it's like.
Cameron, when you arrived in Montreal, did you actually think you had a chance to earn a contract? And what were your emotions today when you came on the field? Were you nervous at all, or did you have any emotions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very goal-oriented individual, and so I knew when I got drafted here, it was my job to work hard and earn a contract. And my dad's always told me every time I play soccer, every time I step onto the field, it's play hard, have fun. So was I nervous stepping on the field? Yeah, I was, but it's more excitement. I think the first game in Mexico really got the nerves out of me. My mouth wasn't as dry when I stepped on the field, so that was good. But yeah, that's all it is. Play hard,
You're going to finish your degree now?
Hopefully. 3 more classes left in the thesis, so.
Cameron, congratulations. When you received the pass on Rome, against the last defense of Pachuca, is the instant that you tried looking for the penalty or shot immediately, because they are the moment, okay, second, okay, I don't know, what was your tendance, okay,
Yeah, I mean, when I got the ball, obviously I collected it off my chest, and I felt the contact from the defender, but he didn't get me enough for me to worry about falling down, and I've been put in that position before through all my years in college, and so I was like, I can finish this here.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Cameron.
And thanks again, Johnny, for taking some time out of his work schedule yesterday. It's always good to give people a chance to defend themselves, and certainly it was kind of funny, the application, and he admitted that himself. But I hope you enjoyed that interview, and I hope that people can maybe move on and just let them try and build their own supporter culture as they see fit there now, because it sounds to me like they sound like everyone else that I've ever met in MLS supporters circles. So I apologize for taking the easy jokes the last few days, and we move on then.
I still don't apologize. This is so funny.
It was funny. He admitted that. He said, if I was a member of another sports group, I'd be taking the piss too. So that's, he was a good guy. He's a genuine good guy. He's a guy that I don't know him, but it sounds like a guy that I'd have a beer with, and I think that most people would too. So
you're just all blue out there. That's all.
Yeah. Well, and I thought what was interesting too, real quickly, is that and I know Kevin wasn't part of the interview, so. He said that their vision was to be a little bit more intimate, a little bit more personable, which is funny because the application came off as the opposite, as exclusive, but they didn't. They want to be inclusive, not exclusive, and they want to be small and personable, not like big and impersonal. And they're not bashing Third Rail, but Third Rail is a really big tent organization where people can just sign up and show up and be part of, get the scarf or whatever. And they kind of wanted to do something different, and that's how they were distinguishing themselves. And they just, I think that we'd have to be in New York and be around the NYCFC right now to fully understand the rationale behind the original application form that went out. But having talked to Johnny yesterday, believe in their sincerity, that they're just a bunch of guys that want to watch football and drink some beer and cheer for the home team. So we move on.
Speaking about cheering for the home team.
Yeah, the Canadian under-17s?
No.
Which home team are you talking about, Kevin?
Montreal last night, Duane. Come on.
Did they win?
Are you kidding me?
That's a bit of a trick question, actually. They did not win. They drew, but they did win.
3 Mexican supporters told me that after the end of the game. And I looked at him and I'm like, are you effing kidding me right now? Are you so delusional that you're like, yeah, take it, but I would not be proud after 2 draws. I would not be happy after just tying a game. Like, are you kidding me? Do you know what? You're the first one who, after scoring the goal, the stupid Pachuca guy was, like, reacting like he never scored a goal in his entire life, and then the other guy just got touched on the shoulder, and he freaking acted like somebody broke his leg with a sledgehammer, and then was carrying off the field, and at the second that the stretcher crossed that white line, that damn guy just got up and ran back into the field. I just wanted to take him and rough him up in the back for a second.
There you go. Kevin is, for those who don't know, he's injured because he was, did you attack several Mexicans? Is that what happened?
Well, if a Mexican is a slang for a guardrail, yes, I did.
Okay.
If you look at all the highlights package, you'll see me, one of those guys jumping on the guardrail on the sideline after Cameron's goal, and my neck is still injured right now, but because of that.
Yeah, for the record, the Two Solitudes podcast does not advocate the attacking of Mexicans or guardrails.
or guardrails.
Or bike racks if you're True. Nigel Real Coker. But at any rate.
Watch out, Nigel. Well, there was no bike rack presence.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Look, yeah, Kevin and I talked a bit off air. And look, I wouldn't say I was cheering for the Impact, but I was not cheering against them either. I just started shaking my head and laughing when the goal went in at the end. And because hilarious, and it's a great sporting moment. And I mean, there are sporting clubs in the world, and we're a bit different in North America, that we kind of expect our teams, because of the tradition of parity and playoffs and all that sort of stuff, that we only view great moments as championship moments. But there are clubs in the world that have lasted 100 years that have not had a moment like that. Okay, like that's the moments that you, as a soccer supporter, as a football supporter, that you dream of, that you hold on to for generations. So, you know, if you're an Impact fan, I hope you enjoyed it, because it was something that was completely out of the blue, and it was the sport at its greatest, and it provided a lot of the fact that it was a kid that no one had barely heard of that scored the goal.
Second game, his 20th minute of play as a professional, and he scores a goal that will be remembered forever. A goal that you could say was probably one of the most important goals in, I was going to say Canadian soccer history, that may be pushing it, but in Quebec and Montreal soccer history for sure, that is the most important goal ever.
Yeah, we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about what it really means for Canadian, capital C, Canadian underlined soccer in a bit, but because I don't want to be a killjoy in this, and I purposely avoided having the conversation last night, but certainly for the local scene in Montreal, it's a massive thing, and especially when you consider the crowds that were happening in Montreal last year, and some of the apathy that had already started to surround that team, to have that jolt of energy. It's just like the Beckham game here in Toronto, to put it back into an analogy that many of my listeners will understand, that people were really kind of sick of TFC when that game happened, and then that revitalized things. Of course, Aaron Vinter drove it back down into the ground, but that's another story altogether. Certainly, it does matter. It matters in terms of inspiration. It does matter in terms of just inspiring the Impact club and to make them drive to better things. Let's talk about the game a little bit, Kevin. I mean, look, I think anyone that's, unless you're the most insane Impact partisan ever, you're going to admit that Pachuca had most of the ball, probably should have scored a few more goals than they did. Bottom line is they didn't, of course, and that is a problem from a Pachuca side. But from an Impact side, watching that game in the first half, let's talk about the first half. What were you thinking in that first half? You weren't seeing a lot of action, or you were seeing a lot of action, because I think you were on that end of the pitch.
Yes,
Kevin,
I was
right?
exactly on the side where Lozano kept passing by Cabrera every single time. Lozano on the wing was really a danger for Pachuca. Him and German Cano, who has a great game. And if it wasn't for the lack of finish by those two guys, it would have been 5-0 like you talked about earlier. A great cross by Lozano to Cano, and Bush made a couple of great saves. Bush had a career night last night. I'm not going to lie. Evan Bush had, in his own words, he had busier nights before that game. But that game, it's just the implication that's surrounding the play, the pressures on a higher level. Every single play can be determined when you know there's a really speedy Mexican that just keeps passing your left back and your right back every single time, and they have a chance to cross it in, or just they're so quick that they don't have to cross. They can just sprint towards the keeper, and that was the most dangerous Pachuca was. And it's almost luck that kept Montreal in the game because of the either mishit shot from Pachuca or defenders carrying at the last second, diving in front of that ball to stop it. It was basically a gasp for air that Montreal just kept on the last grasp until the end. Eventually that penalty killed them, but they were not possessing the ball. They were not doing. It was basically like the first game, not as much, but on the wings, just they got destroyed on the wings. Wayne.
Yeah, look, it speaks to a talent difference, right? Like the Mexican teams, if you want to look at this on a long scale, larger scale sort of perspective, you can't. You have to understand that there's nothing about yesterday's game that indicates that MLS is getting closer, or that the Impact are the same level as Pachuca or anything like that. It's just what it indicates is that the Impact are able in a 2-game tie to do enough to compete to win, and that should give some hope to MLS teams. But in terms of the talent gap, it's still there, and we saw that in the first half. This is again having big concept conversations, not little concept conversations for last night. To go back to what your Mexican friends there were yelling at you, that's pretty typical of Mexican supporters from my experience, that they dismiss everything to do with the MLS and sort of miss the forest for the trees sometimes when it comes to that. But however, look, there is an opportunity here for the Impact to if we don't think that DC United is going to turn it around tonight, or even if DC United does turn it around tonight, like you have a winnable tie in that next round. Well, what are your thoughts about that? Like, I mean, is that what people are talking about now? Like the potential of seeing the final in Montreal?
Yes, but I would just tell people, don't get too excited too quickly. Alajuelenses can still be a formidable opponent. They're the best Costa Rican team out there after Saprissa. But so it could be a great tie. It could be difficult condition of play. We'll be going to Alajuelense if it is in fact Alajuelense. They will have home field advantage. The first game will be in Montreal. The return game will be in Costa Rica. So that's going to be another different experience. But you have to be careful, because those Costa Rican team, they're still pretty good. They're not at the level of the Mexican team, but they're at the level easily of some MLS teams, if not DC United by itself.
Yeah, Alajuelense, look, I'll go a step further. I think they'll be the favorite against the Impact, and I know that's not going to make me popular to hear that. And there's going to be a lot of people that dismiss them because they're not a Mexican team and they're not a team that they've heard of. But they handled DC United 5-2. They actually play on turf down there, so any advantage Montreal might get by that is gone too. Would they play? Yeah, let's quickly. Would they play it at Saputo, or would they play it at the Big O? You figure they'd probably play at the Big O.
It'll be at the Big O. Yeah, it'll be around March 18th, so it has to be the Big O.
Okay. Yeah, but I think that they would be the favorite in that tie. Now, that's to say they wouldn't be the definitive favorite. They would be a favorite on paper that I think that they would have the slight edge over Montreal. But so long as the MLS season is happening, Montreal will be a couple more weeks into their season. I would give them, a decent chance to pull another result off in that. The only other thing, I don't want to be Debbie Downer here today. I'm trying to choose my questions wisely, but I do, having had the experience of the LA Galaxy, the Toronto FC semifinal run a few years ago back, you don't feel the need to warn Impact fans to not count the chickens either when it comes to MLS play. That said, Kevin, having seen them firsthand, do you have a greater confidence that they will be more competitive in MLS? Because CCL and MLS play are different.
Yes.
So do you think that they can translate what you saw yesterday into a much better, much more competitive MLS season?
Yes. If you're looking at the flaws that Montreal had this game or the games prior last week, it was on the wing because of this the pace and the quality of first touch that Mexican players did have. Whenever they did the first touch on the wing, they were setting themselves up for already past the defender, the right back or left back. So that was really impressive to me. You don't see that in MLS really often. So that's one of the thing where Montreal won't be attacked in a way that it was by Pachuca. Other thing, Montreal had some trouble with pressure of the ball because Pachuca was really good avoiding that pressure on the ball carrier. Montreal was not able to. There was a clear 2 second almost every time before a white player was on a black player. So I mean the white jersey and a black jersey.
I followed.
Just in case anybody out there was listening. So it was big difference in MLS. It's not the same. The quality of the first touch of the players and the quality of the ball carriers to handle that type of pressure is not the same. So I think because of those two reasons, it will translate to MLS. Montreal still need to have more ball possession. You cannot get away with 25 and 30% of ball possession and expect to win the majority of your game, even in MLS. But because of not the lack of quality, but because of the difference of skill between Pachuca and some MLS teams, I think it'll be easier for Montreal to get that ball possession. So with all those three factors in, I believe Montreal can have a lot better season than they did last year, but especially with Baki Soumare and Sima in the defense. It's been 2 games, and those players are already impressive, so wait till they get accustomed to each other and build that said chemistry. It could be very solid defensive pair right there.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about Simone a little bit there. Obviously, he had the penalty.
Yeah.
Now, I thought it was a bit CONCACAF'd.
Yeah.
However, there were others, including prominent others, that disagree pretty strongly with that say it was a called like an absolute penalty. Well, so I don't want to get into that debate.
You have to look at it that way, Duane. It is a soft call, but you have to know better. That's the thing. You're playing in CONCACAF. You know those. We've seen it many, many, many times before. Even if Laurent Simon is new, someone told him. That's for sure. So even if it's not like what's the word? Yeah, we know it's not fair, but we should know better and prepare ourselves and not put ourselves in that situation. So that's what I think Simon should have done differently, right? Even if it's a soft call, he should not have put himself in his hand on the shoulder of Cano.
It's actually, I agree 100%. And that's what I've always said when it comes to this is, put that call aside. Let's just talk in general here, Kevin, that often Canadian teams have had really poor, really bad dives that have been called against them and all that. It happens, though, and we've been dealing with it for 40 friggin' years. And at one point, you got to learn that you simply can't get anywhere close to them in the box. You have to adjust your game, and that's, with Simone, I'll give him a bit of break last night. He's never been exposed to that. I believe that wouldn't have been called in Europe. However, others will disagree with me. We're not having a referee show, so there's no point having the debate right now. But the point that Kevin just made is absolutely true. You just have to adjust your game to reflect the refereeing that you're going to get, not the refereeing you hope you get.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we disagree on this, but I did want to make a point that I think, and I don't want to make this about Cameron Porter. Well, first off, let's talk about Cameron Porter. I'll throw that way first. You were saying to me off air that this is a kid that you maybe got a little lucky with to get him so late in the draft. First off, how did that happen? Tell us a bit about him from what you've seen there, and is this a one-off thing for him, or should Montreal Impact fans expect a little bit more from him?
Yes, he's the beginning of his career. It's only his second match. Yes, he's not going to be probably a superstar, but the guy has a little something. He has a composure. First of all, he's only 3 classes away from his thesis in Princeton, 21-year-old. He has to be really smart for that. Always been a work ethic, discipline in athletics and academics were his priority in his life. He was brought up that way. And that's what defines him. He is a player that yesterday, before he walked on the pitch, he turned around and was like, this could be my opportunity, and I have to seize it. And the one thing he kept repeating yesterday was, when you're handed an opportunity like this, you have to seize it. And he's been one of the most impressive striker in the Montreal Impact training camp for the last month and a half. He came in a 3rd-round draft pick, 45th total, not even expected to be signed. And not only did he get signed, but he was signed and then he was put and used a lot before the 1st-round draft pick, which was Romero Williams, and it was a top 4 draft pick. But no, the kid who got picked 45th, because of his work ethic and because of just his, I wouldn't call it charisma, but the guy's got a little something. And in the locker room, they can see that. And his work ethic propelled him to where he had the opportunity yesterday. He did not play a lot. He played like 15 minutes. But in that small window of time of opportunity he had, he made the most of it.
Do you think he'll be he signed an MLS contract by now, has he?
Yes, he did.
Okay, so he may get a
weeks
little bit of time. He may get some time at FC Montreal, but he's more or less going to be an impact player, is what your thinking is? I
believe so, yeah. Especially in the mind of the coaching staff, he's already in front of Romero Williams. Like I said, he was a first-round draft pick, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's close to Jack Mack. Yes, he doesn't have the same experience and composure level that a Jack Mack has because of his experience, but I think Cameron Porter can get close to this with a limited amount of playing time.
All right. And look, what I'm about to say is really not about Cameron Porter. It's a general thought, and he's triggering the thoughts in my head. So I don't want to get bogged down into conversations about Porter per se, and I'm not trying to bash him or say anything else. To take advantage of an opportunity, Kevin, you have to be given an opportunity. And my only contention here is that, are we really sure that there aren't kids from our own system that would not be at least equally of the same, similar quality to Porter, that might not be getting chances because of an inherent bias amongst Canadian observers, Canadian technical people, that our players aren't good enough? I think of a player here in Toronto, and then I'll let you take in Mohamed Babouli, that he's not getting a look for TFC's first team. They're giving him a look in TFC 2 this year, that scores goals by the bucket load in League One last year. He scored goals at every level. Does he not deserve an opportunity? Would he get the same opportunity? I'm not always convinced that we do. We take a kid from Princeton and we say, oh, he played at Princeton, he's American, so surely we can have a look at him. But in the same couple weeks later, you were letting go of Wimet, right? So
yeah, first of all, one's a defender, one's a striker. So
no, I get it,
for
but
that
it's
one,
like,
it doesn't work. But yeah.
It's about opportunity, though. I just don't know whether we give enough opportunity. We take chances. I don't know whether the Canadian teams take chances on the Canadian players enough.
Or do the Canadian players take enough chances in those opportunities and make the most of it, Duane? That could be the other side of the question. I haven't seen a Canadian player take the chance that he has, like Cameron Porter did last night, and make the most out of it. When's the last time you see a Canadian striker, when they are subbing at the 85th minute usually, when did you see him score a goal and make an impact on a game of that level? Rarely you do see that. So yes, you could say they're not getting the chances, but sometimes when you are giving the chances, you have to make the most of it. And I haven't seen that happen for a Canadian player in a long time.
Yeah, it's a chicken egg aspect. I get a look at Bryce Alderson in Vancouver. I don't think he ever got an opportunity. And they'll always say, oh, we didn't impress in training. And that's what people will come back at you with, that you have to be a professional every day of the week. And you're absolutely right. But if you're observing from afar, you just don't know. And it's ultimately all those biases come into play too, even in a training situation, right? I agree with you, and I just finished your thought.
Okay, so what I was saying is, what's more important, your nationality or the soccer players? For me, I don't look at the nationality at the beginning. I look at his soccer player, and does he cut it or not? Then if there's for me, a benefit of having him because of his nationalities, that's different. But does he cut it or not? If you mentioned Wimet, he didn't cut it. End of the question. So that's how
I don't know if he didn't cut it or not.
I tell you, he didn't cut it.
Agree that he had cut it.
He had
okay.
good
promise.
That's
fine.
He showed promise. He showed some great potential, but never achieved it. And that's one thing you have to be honest with yourselves too when you're looking at a prospect, a draft pick. Is it worth keeping it, or do I have something? And sometimes decisions need to be made to go on a separate ways or a different path, you could say.
Well, no, and I agree that Kyle Becker here in Toronto, to give it to an example that I'm more familiar with, needed to move on, although Dallas is going to take a look at him, probably for their, maybe playing secondary minutes down there. But certainly, absolutely, there comes a point when their players have to. My only point is that I just simply don't see the pathways for them, and we need to make sure that we're not being blinded by, like you're saying, you're not seeing the passport. I'm not sure that the technical people aren't seeing the passport, that they aren't negatively seeing passports and aren't negatively making decisions on that, especially when you have technical people that are used to the NCAA system and value the NCAA system over the academy system too. There's an inherent bias there for a lot of people still to just trust raw potential coming from someplace more than raw potential coming from another place. And, we don't want to get bogged down in individual player conversations because that's not what it's about. And this does speak to the fact that, I do think, and I'm not trying to be a troll when I say this, that the more important result last night for Canadian soccer was the U17s beating Costa Rica. It's not more important for fans in Montreal. It's not more fun for fans in Montreal, certainly. But it is more important to speak to the health of the game and the development of the game when you're talking about Canadian soccer, not MLS soccer or Impact soccer. And that's the only point I make. If our U17 kids and our U17 kids the last cycle too did very well, and they didn't get the minutes or the times or the opportunities, so we saw what happened at the U20 level. So let's hope with this group of U17s, which do look promising in this tournament so far, beating Costa Rica is no small feat. Let's just hope that they are given every chance to succeed or fail on their own. That's my only point.
Well, long term, Duane, I have to disagree with you because the most important result last night was not either team, was 38,000 people who had a great time watching soccer in Canada. For me, that's the important talking point coming out of last night. Those 38,000 people, they will be the one cheering for the U17 in 20 years from now when they make it to the World Cup or something. But for that, they need to be supporters. And for everyone to love the country or the club or all that, they need to be supporters. And when you watch a Canada game in the Big O with 5,000 people, I'm not happy. Last year, the U20, I wasn't a happy camper. Because you can see games like last night where there's 38,000 people. So until the country and club divide is resolved, the most important result from last night is just the amount of people watching soccer.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess where I come from there is I don't have any doubts that the Canadians will watch soccer if they're given the opportunity to. We've seen it multiple times.
We're in a bubble, Duane. We have to take ourselves out of that bubble too.
Yeah, well, in the same token, then you need to see 38,000 people attending outside the bubble as well, right? You need to see 38,000 people in Regina to watch the Impact play. That would be impressive. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's not impressive that you got big numbers out there, and I think that it looked like a great time. And I had been hoping to get down and wasn't able to because of the CBA stuff happening yesterday, but it certainly looked like a lot of fun. And I'm right now trying to make plans to get down there for the semifinals. Hopefully, it happens. So. And again, I want to stress, I'm not taking it. I said this a couple times in the show. I have nothing against the Impact. I have nothing against the result last night. I laughed and enjoyed it and watched it. I just my bias and my inherent support is always going to be to make sure that we are trying to grow the sport overall here. And growing the sport overall does include the MLS teams and does include developing partisanship and strong, healthy fan bases around those teams, and that absolutely speaks to that. And there's absolutely was a benefit to Canadian soccer, even if there weren't Canadian players on the pitch last night for the Impact. That's my point and what I remain. It is isolated more or less to Montreal in terms of the feel-goodness of it. I don't think there's many people outside of the bubble that are thinking of this game today, and I think that there's more potential that if we ever did grow the Canadian national team to a level where they were truly successful, truly making a World Cup game, again, that would be the only thing in my mind that would ever really reach the people in Regina. That's my position.
Well, we'll see.
Okay. All right. What are we at now in terms of time?
Long. Very long.
We're very long. I don't think people want to listen to us anymore, do they?
Nah. I think it's done.
All right. If the strike gets resolved, we'll talk at you more. We're going to do five solitudes. We're going to do 5 solitudes tomorrow, Kevin.
Sure.
Okay. All right. In the meantime, Kevin, why don't you say goodbye?
All right. Talk to you soon, guys. And until next time, have a great soccer.